right, I think that's our cue. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this afternoon or morning, wherever you happen to be joining from. My name is Barbara Soots. I am the Assistant Director of Open Education and Instructional Materials at the Washington Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. That's our Washington State Department of Education. And I am joined today by two colleagues that I will let introduce themselves. So Ryan, I'll pass it over to you first.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm really excited about sharing what we've done over the past couple of years. As Barbara mentioned, I'm Ryan. I direct the Global Classroom Program for the World Affairs Council in Seattle. And in addition to that, I'm a full-time high school teacher in Snohomish, Washington. I teach social studies. So thank you for coming. Michele?
Hi, I'm Michele Anciaux-Aoki, and I'm actually retired from my jobs in K-12. I used to work at the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, where Barbara is now as World Languages and International Education Program Supervisor. And then also I used to work for the World Affairs Council, where Ryan is as well as a administrator in Seattle Public Schools. I'm an affiliate faculty with the University of Washington Slavic Department. So I work with languages, and in particular, less commonly taught languages that generally don't get taught in our schools or colleges.
All right. So as we get started here, I just wanted to let you know that a copy of the slide deck and then also a handout with all the links that we're going to be mentioning throughout the program, as well as some additional information. Those are both available for you in the program description in is it SCED? Well, anyway, the online app that we've all been using to refer to the schedule. So please feel free to refer to those. I'm going to give you just a little bit of background and context about our Washington K-12 OER project. And I promise to keep it brief because then I want to turn you over to Ryan and Michele to talk about the actual resources that we're going to be highlighting today. So just a bit of background, Washington's K-12 OER project was really born out of state legislation that was passed back in 2012 that was directing our State Department of Ed to create a collection of openly licensed resources and an awareness campaign that went out to districts to let them know that these were options to look at when they were looking at instructional materials. That legislation was really born out of the great works of our colleagues in higher ed and the Open Course Library from the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. Right now, the three areas that we're really focusing on with our project are OER awareness and advocacy. We work with school districts across the state, providing professional learning and technical support to really talk about how to effectively implement OER in the classroom and how to consider adopting it if you're looking at core instructional material. We work with OER review and development, really emphasizing adaptation to local contexts and student needs. We have a grant program that Ryan and Michele are the recipients of. And last part is we're proud to be part of the OER Commons platform. We have a hub on OER Commons called the Washington OER Hub, and that's the primary way that we distribute developed resources to folks in our state, across the country, and around the world. There is a brief video here that talks a little bit about the Washington OER Hub that I am not going to show you now. But if you have a 3-minute stretch break at some time and would like to take a look at that, that gives you a brief overview of our online platform and the goals that we have with its implementation. The Sustainable Development Goal resources that Ryan and Michele are going to be talking to you about today can be found on the Washington OER Hub. I have given you a QR code to access their group on the hub. And you can also just hop onto the platform and search for that resource directly and be able to find that. quick note about how resources make their way onto our platform. It's a little bit different than, I know, a model that a lot of people have is just everyone can upload any resources that they would like to. We have a bit more of a curated model with the Washington Hub. So the types of materials that you'll find on there are resources that have been developed by our State Department of Ed at the behest of the legislature. For instance, we have a since time immemorial curriculum that was developed in collaboration with our federal tribes across the state. We work with external partners and state organizations like our Office of Secretary of State or Department of Natural Resources to provide their materials. We collaboratively work with educators. We oftentimes have contracts with educators to create supplemental lessons that are indicated or areas of need, actually. When the pandemic hit, we worked with our content experts at OSPI to start curating some third-party OER as well. So we do make that available. And lastly, we have grants that are available for school districts and nonprofit organizations around the state to apply for and then receive seed money to create openly licensed resources. All the resources that we have on the Hub have undergone review, so they are vetted to make sure that they are aligned with our state learning standards and contain clear objectives and goals. We want to make sure that the resources on there are up to date, especially in areas where content is changing so rapidly. That they're rigorous for all students, that they are developmentally and culturally appropriate, support sound teaching practices, and most importantly, that they cultivate student interest and engagement. We actually have or I've linked rather, our Washington OER Hub submission criteria and the review rubric that we use. So you are welcome to take a look at that. We've recently added a couple of areas about AI developed resources. And so that's something that we look at as well. So you might want to pop into that document and take a look. But with that, I'm going to turn you over to Ryan and Michele. This is the favorite part of my job. I get to highlight the wonderful work that our grantees have been doing. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Barbara. So I think I'd like to start for just a moment to tell you how this project was initiated and maybe a little bit more about the World Affairs Council in Seattle. You know, we're part of a national network of World Affairs Councils, and many of them have education departments. And one of the goals of our program here in Seattle is to provide curriculum resources for educators and for students. So we spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, how we can provide support K-12 to bring the world into the classroom. We also have some other projects that we work on with teachers aside from professional development. And that's kind of where this project got started. Michele and I were part of a project that really started in Seattle Public Schools a number of years ago around something called a Global Competent Certificate Portfolio Project. And what we wanted to do is give students an opportunity to reflect on their international experiences or local experiences that were cross-cultural. We wanted to give them an opportunity to reflect on their own academic classes that contained global content. And then we also wanted them to reflect on their language learning. And so we started that, I think, Michele, what was it,
2017, I think.
2017. And so we were doing that, and it sort of evolved into working with some other partners of ours in different heritage languages. And so we worked with a team of instructors and students from around the Puget Sound region. And I'll tell you why this is relevant to this project, but in Romanian, Spanish, Ukrainian, and Russian. And as we went through this project, and Michele can talk a little bit more about that too, we also realized that we wanted to have additional resources for having those students sort of explore global issues. And that's sort of where we came up with this idea, because we'd been using the Sustainable Development Goals with these groups of students, but also I'm a big fan of using the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity for a variety of reasons to support this project, but then also to support, teachers and students, not only within Washington State, but around the country. Michele, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I just want to agree with you there. The work on global competence has been happening for about 20 years. Asia Society was a major leader of it. So it is happening throughout the country. And I think one of the things that's so exciting about open educational resources is that you can do something extra in one place, but then it can be disseminated and shared everywhere, which is amazing.
And I would say one of the goals with this project also is to get these materials in the hands of teachers, but then also be available to help adapt and modify and contextualize these materials for students and teachers in their own school communities. I'll just say also, as we move on to the next slide, that I was part of a program sponsored by the State Department called Teachers for Global Classrooms. It's a Fulbright program now that some of you are aware of, and we use the SDGs a lot in the work that we did over the course of our fellowship. And so I was always looking for ways that I could integrate these more into my own classroom, but also integrate these into the work that I'm doing at the World Affairs Council. So for those who may not be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 goals. And so far, as part of this project, we've created curriculum modules for 12 of the different SDGs. And so we have 5 left to go: good health and well-being, decent work and economic growth, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, and then finally partnership for the goals. And I'll tell you why I love these goals so much, and what we've done, and why this also makes this project a little bit unique. So Barbara, if you want to go on to the next slide, please. So why implement the SDGs? Well, Michele mentioned global competence, which is a big focus of what I'm doing in my classroom with my students. But I think global education and global competence is something that can really prepare students, for their future, for their civic life, future college plans, for their career. I really feel like the lessons that we created here provide opportunities to think about how our world is interconnected and interdependent. And so there are opportunities for us to not only think globally, but then also think locally. And I know here in the Seattle area, we have a lot of things happening where we are tied to the world. And so we thought this would be a great opportunity to try these out here. They're student-centered, they're project-based lessons. They're adaptable for different grade levels, even though these lessons probably are geared more towards high school students and maybe upper middle school. We have a lot of elementary school teachers that are now very interested in bringing global issues into their classroom. And so we've been working with primary schools as well, which these can be adapted to. During the pandemic, when we were working on some of these modules and the work that we were doing with the Global Competence Certificate portfolio, it started by giving students an opportunity to do something when they weren't in school full time. And so Michele can talk a little bit more about that, but it offered an opportunity to also create lessons that could be adapted to a virtual modality, which I think was nice. We also were very interested in wanting to provide equitable and inclusive access to global education. Sometimes it's easier for some students and teachers, in the Seattle area to access some of these materials. We really wanted to make sure that these materials were available everywhere. And so that's what we attempted to do with the OER curriculum we created. And then just some other things. Barbara mentioned, that they're all standard aligned, and I use the C3 framework, the national framework, a lot in my classroom, and really the 21st century skills that I want my students to leave my classrooms with. Michele, do you have anything that you wanted to add in
I
that?
think the only thing I would add, and especially because this is such an international conference, is that so often we kind of do things that are centric to the United States and centered on the United States. And what I love about this is that these are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And wherever you go, you can find information from the different countries that have subscribed to these goals. And so it also is an entree for students, especially in our case, we were working with heritage language speakers of the languages that Ryan mentioned, for them to go and explore the resources in the country of their ancestors or their parents, or maybe some of them were born there as well. So I really highly recommend them as a great place to start for any level, college as well.
Thanks, Michele. So where are we going? What are we hoping to do? What are we doing at the moment? Well, I mentioned we're working on the 5 additional lessons, so we're really excited to have all 17 sustainable development goals completed. And one of the things that we wanted to continue to work on with teachers is contextualizing those lessons for their own classrooms. So, and it doesn't even have to be somebody who's local. It could be somebody in a different state or somewhere around the world that we could work with. We really are excited about these lessons and willing to work with teachers in terms of making them relevant and meaningful to their own context. So we continue to get feedback from teachers and students. The other thing that I like about the goals is they're very interdisciplinary. So for example, you've got water and sanitation, you've got quality education, you have creating sustainable cities, you have climate action. And I'll talk about that in just a moment with a local project that we did where I adapted some of our work for my own classroom. But there, you really could design an entire school around the sustainable development goals. That could be your curricular framework. So we want to foster collaboration within and across schools. There are other partners. I do quite a bit of work with the University of Washington and their Jackson School for International Studies. So we try to bring these lessons also to them. I think what might be useful too is for Michele to talk a little bit about how we were able to translate some of the student-facing materials into these other languages. Only the first 6 SDGs have been done so far, but we're hoping to translate the other ones as well. But it's an amazing process, and Michele really is the expert there. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Michele?
Sure. Yes, I think, well, there's several aspects to this. One is that we had previously gotten a grant in order to translate an already existing OER resource called The State We're In, about Washington state history. And so we had translated that into Spanish and Mandarin for our dual language immersion programs in Seattle, because the students in middle school are taking social studies, and but they're learning content through these languages. So it really gave us an understanding of the power of OER, and especially when you can start with something that's already well vetted and experienced, and now take it into another language. It's very culturally interesting to think of that as well. And so that's why we proposed to do it in this project, because these lessons are a little smaller than that whole big book. But to coordinate 4 languages at once, and how to, we have busy people. Fortunately, they were getting paid, a little bit, not a huge amount, but that again makes a huge difference to have these grants to support the OER development. And so we decided that we would focus on the student-facing materials so that those would be available for the teachers, for example, in community-based heritage language programs, or in schools where there are speakers of these languages. We have a lot of both Russian and Ukrainian immigrants, as well as Spanish speakers, of course, in our state, and actually a fair number of Romanians, as it turns out. And so We also hope that these materials will get used in other countries. So obviously there's quite a diaspora of Ukrainian speakers, but these would be something that could be picked up in Germany or elsewhere where Ukrainian students are living. And so one of the things I just wanted to mention, having been at the conference already 2 days now, that I've been so excited to see all the interest in how to bring AI, generative AI, into helping support the development of OER materials. So one of the things that I chose to do, in part because I am really doing a lot of exploration with ChatGPT and generative AI right now, is we agreed that I would do the initial draft 1 of the translations using ChatGPT, and I had to organize this all. I used a Google Doc where I could put into ChatGPT, translate this section in these 4 languages and put it in a table. So it was all very easy for the teachers to find their section and then make adjustments. So everything, I would never want to put something out that had not been vetted by a highly qualified speaker of the language or teacher of the language. But it gave them a really good place to start from, and so that in itself was an interesting experience. And we gave you a we've got the drafts right there, that link, and so you can, if you want to just go see kind of what it looked like, what ChatGPT produced. That's what's there is pretty much what ChatGPT produced. So there are differences in the final versions because of the human editing and addition, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't far off. So it's quite a great experience. So I do hope you'll go just take a look at that. And I want you to also know just how important it is to these communities, how much they feel valued that we are producing materials in their languages. And the Romanians, for example, have a nonprofit, the American Romanian Cultural Society, that offers classes to heritage speakers of Romanian. And when they see that these things are actually coming as official documents from the state available for them to use in their schools, it just means that they count, they mean something, which it's about time, right? So thank you for the opportunity to share these.
Thank you, Michele. I won't spend a lot of time on this because I know we just have a few minutes left, but this is an example of something that I implemented in my own classroom. I had an opportunity through the state of Washington, was working on climate action in the civics classroom. So there's an example of some interdisciplinary work. So I thought, well, this would be a perfect opportunity because one of our first lessons was on climate action. And so we looked at this at a local level. So in our own community, we looked at what was going on in Snohomish, where I live, around climate action and what policymakers were doing. And here you can see that little sort of overview brochure of our community. And so I connected the Sustainable Development Goals and some of the work we had done through this climate action civics program. And Barbara has been probably knows about this that we have the civics and climate assembly project that's online now, I think, right, Barbara? Is it? So it's available for teachers. It's a different grant and a different project, but it's obviously relevant to this work as well. So, and we wrote some lessons for that also. But this has just been a great experience. And I really want to thank Barbara for the opportunity to work on this over the past 3 years. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I know we only have about 30 seconds left for questions before the timer goes off. Happy to stick around after the recording stops and answer any questions, or if you want to pop anything in the chat window, we can try and address those really quickly. All right. Well, thank you again to everyone for stopping by and listening to our presentation. Again, we've got links to all of the resources that have been mentioned, and any contact information is up on the screen. So please feel free to reach out and ask any questions that you might have. Thank you again.